and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Better if I unmute. You're back with David Mackey's Shiny Side Out on Revolution Radio, the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the internet. Remember when that was made, Mackey? Oh, so long ago.
Oh, I do. Many longs ago.
It's coming up to 30 years of public use. So, do you know what you have to do? You have to push the donate button. Also go and jump into the archives and download any of the host shows that you like, and you can binge them. They're in MP3 format. Fantastic for being able to do what we do today in our current world. Binge! Makes you feel good on the inside. And tired sometimes because you have to take in too much information. So also get yourself some great merchandise from the station's website. You know, there's t-shirts, mugs, and a whole bunch of things. And you can also support Dave and Mackey's Shiny Side Out by going to our website, shinysideout.net, and we have a merchandise, we have a merch drop there. It's pretty cool. And thank you very much for listening to Revolution Radio. It's so much more stable now, Mackey, I think, that they've ironed out all of the problems. It had been in an interim state for a while, which we thought was permanent, but it's been now moved, and it's all the way up there in the cloud. You know that cloud above us all? That's where it is. And happy days. It's just really someone else's computer. That's all it really is. Anyway, we're halfway through show number 653. I went ahead of myself. 653, Becky.
That's right, 350 and
600. And
that's true.
And the topic for today, from what I understand, is 9/11 23 years on.
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. Now, why? Why after 23 years are we coming back here? Why does it matter? What's the difference? Who cares, right? Who cares? Well, we're coming here again because many questions remain unanswered. Still, many guilty parties are not facing justice and never will because they've now passed on into the great beyond. And many grieving survivors still do not know what really happened that day. In fact, people talk about the 9/11 Commission report, etc., you know, a whole bunch of stuff. You know, that's all good, but it didn't answer any questions. We'll get to that in due course. Okay, it's the one event that shaped the world like no other has in the past 50 years. It's really one of those nexus points. It's a distinct before and a distinct after. The moon landing. even if we think it didn't happen, but the world believed it happened in July. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I don't know. I'm on the fence. There's a lot of evidence. Have we gone to the moon? Yes, we have. Yes. Did we go then? I don't know. But the point is, it was one of those events that shaped us. Pivotal moment was the moon landing. Another pivotal moment was, of course, the end of World War II. That was a big one, massive one, and the world was never the same. And then another event in World War II that shaped the world to come after were the detonations of the atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Pivotal again. And 2008, in my opinion, was also a pivotal moment when capitalism officially died and was put into a shallow grave, unmarked. Now, we found a number of new resources and opinions, and I intend to bring them to you. Probably won't be able to do it all today, dear listener, but after we finish the 9/11 retrospective, we're going to talk about government experimentations on people, their own people, other people, doesn't really, medical experimentation, others as well. And when I first looked at it, I thought, how much could there possibly be? A lot is the answer. A lot. But in the context of 9/11, this was recently, through a friend, Dan. Don't think Dan listens to the show, but Dan, thanks for putting me onto the book. It's the case of Susan Lindauer. And it's a really interesting case. I read her book, and I skimmed it, and now I'm rereading it again. It's fascinating stuff. In fact, if you look at her and her official biography, if you will, online you're going to find it anywhere you want. It's in Wikipedia, other places as well. It's a really strange one, this one. Really strange, but it is deeply connected, or she is, I should say, deeply connected to 9/11 and the war in Iraq. And you really have to read her book to get her side of the story, because the official story is that, in fact, she was tried to be an Iraqi agent, and then the case was dismissed because she wasn't competent to stand trial. But, again, you really need her side of the story and read the book. But, so who's Susan Lindauer? She was born July 17, 1963, so of a similar vintage to Dave and I. She's an American journalist and former U.S. congressional staffer who was charged with acting as an unregistered agent of a foreign government and violating U.S. financial sanctions during the run-up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. This is important. She was incarcerated in 2005 and released the next year after 2 judges ruled her mentally unfit to stand trial. The government dropped the prosecution in 2009. In 2010, Lindauer published a book about her experiences. Since 2011, Lindauer has appeared frequently on television and in print as a U.S. government critic. Dave.
Yeah?
I did send it.
Oh, I see now. Hang on a minute.
No, I keep going. Career. Lindauer began in journalism, working as a temporary reporter at the Seattle Post Intelligencer in 1987, and as an editorial writer of the Everett Herald in Everett, Washington until 1989. She later worked as a reporter and researcher at U.S. News and World Report in 1990 and 91. Lindauer worked as a congressional staffer for Representative Peter DeFazio, a Democrat from Oregon, 1993, and then Representative Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon, 1994, before joining the office of Senator Carol Moseley Brown, Democrat from Illinois, where she worked as a press secretary and speechwriter until later. She served as press secretary for Representative Zoe Lofgren, again Democrat from California, from March 11, 2002 to May 14, 2002. Her interest in the Middle East, Dave, or?
I'm still trying to find where we're up to.
Okay, well, the first page. Really.
Oh, I've got it. Interest in the Middle East. In November 1993, a friend of Lindauer's father introduced her to former Vietnam War combat pilot Paul Hoven at a restaurant next to the Heritage Foundation. She began socializing in an informal circle of conservatives interested in counterterrorism, including Capitol Hill staff and intelligence community members, including Dr. Richard Fusey. And according to an article posted on New Zealand website Scoop, senior congressional staffer Kelly O'Meara. Lindauer has described Fusey as her Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, contact and handler. At the time of Lindauer's first meeting with Fusey, theories of the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103, that was Lockerbie, wasn't it, in 1988 were divided between blaming the Libyan government under Muammar Gaddafi, which took responsibility in 2003, and the Syrian Ahmed Jabril. Lindauer said that Fusey had shared with her his belief that the US government had falsely pinned the blame on Libya. Lindauer and Fusey said they met an average of once per week from 1994 to 2001. In 2000, the Sunday Herald in Scotland reported that US sources told them Fusey had been an operative for the CIA in Damascus during the 1980s. Fouzi did not confirm or deny this, saying he was not permitted to speak about it. That sounds real to me.
Yep.
Landauer said she began making visits to the Libyan mission at the United Nations, the UN, in 1985, and with Iraqis at the UN in 1996. In 2000, she told Middle East Intelligence Bulletin that she had been subject to surveillance, threats, and was attacked after meeting Libyan officials in 1995 to discuss what she had learned about the Flight 103 bombing. On November 26, 2000, then President-elect George W. Bush appointed Landauer's second cousin once removed, Andrew Card, as White House Chief of Staff upon his inauguration. Card had previously served as Deputy Chief of Staff and Secretary of Transportation for George H.W. Bush, and had been selected by George W. Bush to run the 2000 Republican National Convention. Starting in 2000, Landauer delivered multiple letters to Card, leaving them on the doorstep of his home in Northern Virginia. In her letters, she urged Card to intercede with President George W. Bush not to invade Iraq, and offered to act as a back channel in negotiations. According to Scoop, that's the publication, over approximately 2 years, Landauer wrote Card a total of 11 letters, the last on January 6, 2003, 2 months before the invasion of Iraq. Card later told the FBI that Landauer had tried to contact him several times, but according to a statement by White House spokesperson Scott McClellan, Card did not recall seeing or talking to Landauer after January 2001 inauguration. There's whole 2 years missing there. According to Scoop, in a 2008 hearing, one of Landauer's associates testified that she had mentioned in an imminent attack on Manhattan with airplanes in 2001. Landauer, in her book, claims that she was asked by Fouzi to ask the Iraqi diplomats if they knew about an imminent attack. According to Landauer, pre-9/11 information was part of her work with Fouzi. According to Scoop, Fouzi's interactions with Landauer ended in 2001, i.e., he had a falling out with Landauer after the September 11 attacks in 2001, no longer welcoming her into his office. He said that before the attacks, she was Arabist, but Arabist from the standpoint of trying to lift sanctions so that children would do better, and trying to get medicines into countries. Principally, I'm talking about Iraq and Libya. Landauer described her falling out with Fouzi in a 2009 interview, saying that it had been in regard to the approach taken in reacting to the possibility of an imminent attack. He said that after September 11, Susan, in her discussions, went from benign, in my opinion, to malignant. These discussions changed and now involved a very strong, seditious bent. Mekki.
Which really endears her to me. Again, it really would be good if everybody could read her book. And we'll talk about that in a second. Because she was a peace activist. She was used as an asset by the CIA for back channel talks to Iraq and Libya. Initially Libya, in fact, but then later Iraq. And she had two handlers. Hoven was one, and Fouzi was the other. And they provided tried to provide the U.S. government with significant warnings prior, or with to the of the attacks, to the point where she tried to, I guess, to some extent exonerate the intelligence services, because everybody thought there was a complete failure of the intelligence services, saying this this attack,
see it,
no one
happened,
didn't see it. It was. And in fact, Condoleezza Rice said, we never even considered that planes could be used, which was complete nonsense, of course. As early as the 50s, the Americans themselves were thinking about Operation Northwoods, false flag attacks with planes, etc., so blaming Cuba at the time. But she did, and so she tried to say, no, this is not what happened at all. In fact, she, in her book as well, she very strongly suggests that at the very least, the attacks were allowed to happen because they furthered Bush's, or the entire government's plan on Iraq, which was to invade. They wanted to invade Iraq by hook or by crook. Right from the start, they tried to pin 9/11 on Iraq. Right? Find a link with 9/11. Find a link of Osama bin Laden to Saddam Hussein. Get Iraq somehow involved, and they couldn't really. And 2 years after they had invaded Afghanistan, they invaded Iraq, and Rumsfeld said the main reason for the invasion was because there aren't any good targets in Afghanistan to bomb. That is, because Afghanistan is if you want to fight a war, there are two places in the world that you shouldn't pick. One is Vietnam, and the other is Afghanistan.
That's right.
Completely. Anyway.
Besides, they had Enron's financial interests to look after.
Oh, well, there's that, right? And this is really the point that she made as well. Now, let's look a bit further here. Her arrest, incarceration, and then really subsequent release. On March 11, 2004, which is again 3 or 2.5 years after 9/11, by the way, Lindauer was arrested in Tacoma Park in Maryland by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. She was taken to the FBI office in Baltimore. Outside of this office, she told WBAL-TV, this is what she said, "I'm an anti-war activist and I'm innocent. I did more to stop terrorism in this country than anybody else. I've done good things for this country. I worked to get weapon inspectors back to Iraq when everybody else said it was impossible." And again, I urge you to look at her book to get the detail. Lindauer was indicted by a grand jury for, this is her charge, acting as an unregistered agent of a foreign government. And of course, they were referring to Iraq at that point. An accusation usually made against foreign spies. In an interview with Scoop, Lindauer stated she was charged and held in detention under the U.S. Patriot Act. She said that this was to silence her from revealing what she knew about 9/11, which was that the airplane hijackings were used as a public cover for a controlled demolition of the Twin Towers and Building 7, and that the perpetrator, Mohammed Atta, was a highly trained CIA asset. Now this is you just heard where she was, like officially where she worked. She was within, the reach of government. She probably was a CIA asset. She's not lying about that, and she's saying this, everybody. Okay, let's go on. The indictment against Lindauer alleged that she accepted $10,000 US from the Iraqi intelligence service in 2002. Lindauer denied receiving the money, but confirmed taking a trip to Baghdad. Lindauer was also accused of meeting with an FBI agent posing as a Libyan, with whom she spoke about the need for plans and foreign resources to support resistance groups operating in Iraq. Lindauer said she went to the meeting because of her interest in filing a war crimes suit against the US and UK governments. Pursuant to Lindauer's arrest, Congresswoman Lofgren released a statement saying she was shocked by the arrest, that she had no evidence of illicit activities by Lindauer, and that she would cooperate with the investigation. Robert Precht, an assistant dean of the University of Michigan Law School, said the charges were weak and that Lindauer was more likely a misguided peacenik. Lindauer was released on bond on March 13, 2004 to attend an arraignment the following week. Sanford Talkin of New York was appointed by the court as her lawyer. So it was a court-appointed lawyer. Now, in her book, the guy was described as completely incompetent, essentially, right? Completely incompetent. And again, in the book, you'll find out that actually her uncle came to her aid as well, because he was a top lawyer. So she's actually, she's well connected in the, I guess, the political and establishment circles of the United States, right? That's really the important thing here. Let's go back to the text. Lindau claimed she was conducting peace negotiations with representatives of several Muslim countries, including Iraq, Libya, Malaysia, and Yemen, in New York. According to transcripts Lindau presented to the New York Times in 2004, these included meetings with Iraqi Muthana al-Houthi, a peace activist later accused of spying. Lindau also said that the U.S. intelligence community was aware of these meetings and was monitoring her. President George W. Bush listens to remarks. In 2005, Lindau was incarcerated at Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth, Texas, for psychological evaluation. She was then moved to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. In 2006, she was released after Judge Michael B. Mukasey ruled that Lindau was unfit to stand trial. He noted that the severity of Lindau's mental illness, which he described as a lengthy delusional history, weakened the prosecution's case. In his decision, he wrote this: Lindau could not act successfully as an agent of the Iraqi government without in some way influencing normal people. There's no indication that Lindau ever came close to influencing anyone or could have. The indictment charges only what it describes as an unsuccessful attempt to influence an unnamed government official, and the record shows that even lay people recognize that she is seriously disturbed. During Lindau's incarceration, she refused antipsychotic medication, which the United States Department of Justice claimed would render her competent to stand trial. Judge Mukasey would not allow her to be forcibly medicated as requested by the prosecution. The prosecution requested that she would be forcibly medicated. Now, I don't know that you... Okay, so if you're psychotic, antipsychotic medication is actually quite helpful. Okay? Let's just be clear on that. If you're not psychotic, it is not.
You're going to be in a minute.
It is... It is not. Antipsychotic medication is extremely harmful because it changes your brain chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
If you're psychotic, that's a good thing. Good thing. Not psychotic, not a good thing, right? So what is psychosis, right? What conditions does it treat? Schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, psychotic depression, as well as treatment-resistant depression. That's what it's used for. Okay. And if you don't have any of those, you might end up with them if they give you antipsychotic drugs. And again, read her book to get more on that. But the judge said no, you can't forcibly medicate her. And but the prosecution had asked for it. Remember that the prosecution had asked for it. At a hearing in June 2008, Lindau told reporters that she had been a CIA asset and that she had been hung out to dry and scapegoated. In 2008, Justice Loretta R. Preska of the Federal District Court in New York City reaffirmed that Lindau was mentally unfit to stand trial, despite Lindau's insistence on the contrary. She wanted to stand trial. Testifying before Loretta Preska, the New York Times reported that Lindau angrily contested an accusation in her indictment that she had illegally lunched with Iraqi intelligence operatives. On January 16, 2009, the government decided to not continue with the prosecution, saying prosecuting Lindau would no longer be in the interest of justice. Now, let's be very clear here. It is a very old and tried and true method to paint someone as psychologically unstable or mentally ill in order to discredit them. That's as old as the playbook of the CIA. Okay, and it is clear here that's exactly what they tried to do. So if we give Ms. Lindau the benefit of the doubt here for a second, and saying what she said is true, that she had tried to warn the government, which again is not really much of a stretch, to be honest with you, and that she had information that would have stopped the event of 9/11, etc., etc. But the government decided, no, that's no good. We need this event to happen in order to. And then, in fact, if you look at it, without 9/11, the Bush administration wouldn't have been able to do any of the things it did. No homeland no Homeland Security Office,
no Patriot Act.
no Patriot Act 1 and 2, no invasion of the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, etc. None of that.
And the world would have stayed the same.
The world would have stayed there, but it didn't. So, and then they're trying to well, first of all, you get the psych evaluation, so there it is, right? But then give her the antipsychotic drugs, because this was the fear that she had, and it's really well. She talks about it in the book at length. Okay, I'm not going to read the book out to you now, but if the desire exists, I will do it. And again, it's her point of view as well, right? But I did read the book, and it's self-published, so the editing isn't awesome. But that book doesn't read like it was written by someone who suffers from any form of psychosis. Okay, and I did study psych. Well, I never practiced it. You know, I'm not claiming to be an expert at all, but the point is the book doesn't read like that. It reads like a factual kind of retelling of events. It's also self-consistent. It's consistent within itself. It doesn't have gaps or flights of fancy or little magic squares, you know, that seem to just pop up and solve problems. Not at all. Okay, so I think we have to entertain the thought that she is not in fact psychotic or in any way delusional. But it's the easiest way to discredit someone by far. Dave, why don't you tell us about the book?
And subsequent claims. In 2010, Lindauer self-published a book about her experience titled Extreme Prejudice, the terrifying story of the Patriot Act and the cover-ups of 9/11 and Iraq. Lindauer wrote that for a number of years she had worked for the CIA and Defense Intelligence Agency, undertaking communications with the Iraqi government and serving as a back channel in the US government negotiations. In October 2012, she denied being the author of the Markovian parallax denigrate Usenet postings of August 5th, 1996, which have been described as the internet's oldest and weirdest mystery. A different Susan Lindauer had been a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point at the time of the post, and her email was the one spoofed in the message. In a Daily Dot piece about the story, Lindauer was described as a purveyor of sundry conspiracy theories, from a Lockerbie bombing cover-up to 9/11 trutherism, and a full-blown celebrity among certain members of the paranoid class. Becky.
And that's enough to kill your credibility, right? Now, again, I urge you to read the book. That's the one I'm reading, by the way, Extreme Prejudice, right? Terrifying story, etc., etc. And if it's true, that's the smoking gun right there. There's no, we don't have to go any further to look. And clearly, if you look at her career, she was connected. And due to her peace activism, you know, prior to being an asset for the CIA, it makes perfect sense that she would have been an asset, in fact, right? And neither Fuzzi nor Hoven, any of them, deny that they know her. They're not denying it. And Fuzzi himself said, I can't tell you if I'm not allowed to talk about whether or not I work for the CIA. Now, again, if he didn't work for the CIA, you said, I don't work for the CIA. I don't. I'm not allowed to talk about it. That's saying, yeah, okay, I'm working for the CIA, but, you know, I really can't talk about it, which is, of course, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's hilarious that people will actually do that. You know, it's just
that's what clearance means. You're not allowed to discuss it. You know. Yeah,
which is a funny thing. Nonetheless, it's really quite telling that, you know, someone like that would come forward and say, "Oh, look, this is what happened," and that's how we did it, and that's ultimately what the outcome was. And again, they tried to do away with her. Yeah, they tried to silence her, you know, by calling her an enemy, a spy. Now, if this was true, then the government should have prosecuted her, irrespective. I mean, look at the other people that are in jail without prosecutions, even, you know, for 9/11. 20 years, no trial. 20 years, no trial. Khalid. What was it? Khalid? I forget his first name. Anyway. point is, Sheikh Khalid, yeah, he's never seen trial, not yet. Obama tried, that didn't work because apparently the security costs would have been too high. And other whistleblowers have been prosecuted more and more. And if she was an agent, a foreign agent, or acting as a foreign agent, then she should be prosecuted. But no, it is no longer in the interest of justice. What? Okay. Well, because I think they've sufficiently discredited her. She no longer is taken seriously by, I guess, Middle America in a way. That's really the only people that matter in this kind of thing, or even the rest of the world, right? She was declared unfit to stand trial, and you really have to read her book to understand what happened. They tried to forcibly give her antipsychotic medication. Now, if she was psychotic, right, and then they would have diagnosed that, and the treatment could be administered.
That's right.
But that didn't happen either. Her evaluation said that she wasn't fit to stand trial. So all the things she said were simply
dismissed under that.
Dismissed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were called lengthy delusional history. Lengthy. So all the things she's talked about. So the prosecution said she did this and that and the other, right? Because she was acting. They tried to prosecute her as an Iraqi agent. So she clearly had some kind of connection with something in in the shadow.
Never going to get up. Yeah.
Yeah, but the point is, the prosecution said she definitely had connections in this shadowy world, right? Whereas the judge said, no, it's all delusional. So which one is it? You can't have it both ways, right? So this is really interesting, and she did work in those circles of power, right? And her father was connected, her mother was connected, they're all connected, right? And her second cousin worked as the staffer for the Bush administration, for crying out loud. I mean, that's a direct line. If you have something to say, which is what she did, you tell him. So you tell the the chief of staff is that's really an important position in any administration. Okay, just to be clear, we're talking about power brokers here. Anyway, there's another thing that we and that still exists, and that's the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. Okay, and it's still up and going, and the petition is still up and going. If you wanted to go and look at it, 3,500 architects and engineers and 2,700 military call for a new investigation of all 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers to this day. And on their website, it says Jill Stein and Jimmy Dore headline the AE 9/11 Truth 2024 anniversary event. If we think of every year since September 11, 2001, as if it's an hour in a day, then we're on the verge of starting the 24th hour of our fight for truth and justice. What have we accomplished in the first 23 hours of a day, and what will the next one bring? As we embark on our 2024 anniversary event, 9/11 is gaining new attention and being questioned by some of the most influential independent commentators on the scene today. This is creating a new sense of hope that the truth about this massive deception will be exposed to all. This is still happening. You can actually go to LinkedIn and look for the Architects for Jesus and Truth, or you go to the website, which is www.ae911truth.org. Yeah, and look at it. The next one here, Dave. Now, the next one is an article from Popular Mechanics, and we're only focusing on the comments to the following article, some of which are only a few days old, believe it or not. Okay, so the article was written a while ago, mind you, but the comments are still alive and well, it seems. And
so
the article was... Sorry?
Are you reading this one?
No, you're reading it.
Okay.
That's the report, my friend.
So this is Popular Mechanics examines the evidence and consults the experts to refute the most persistent conspiracy theories of September 11. Is that correct?
Correct. But we're not looking at the article. The article is just rehashing. Yeah, we're just looking at the comments to that, but because the article itself deals with all the debunking that we all know very well. We've all heard why, and the fuel and the steel was weakened, etc., etc. But I found the comments more interesting than the article.
Oh, that's cool. All right. So Gene 911 commented, PM's 9/11 debunking piece is a masterclass in manipulative writing, logical fallacies, and physiological manipulation. PM begins its so-called debunking with a clear attempt at psychological manipulation, labeling anyone who questions the official narrative as truthers and implying they're driven by irrationality. This opening relies on yellow journalism tactics, smearing skeptics right out of the gate rather than engaging with the evidence. By framing the article as a response to conspiracy theories and invoking the authority of figures like Senator McCain, they attempt to substitute rhetoric and appeal to authority for actual critical examination. The tone is condescending, dismissing valid scientific concerns as nothing more than the product of a tinfoil hat fringe. The article further reveals its bias by brushing aside 2 decades of legitimate questions about World Trade Center 7's freefall collapse and the discovery of nanothermite, without even acknowledging these key points. Instead of addressing the most glaring evidence head on, they rely on vague phrases like subsequent studies to gloss over the complexities of the event. This introduction sets the stage for a defense of the official narrative that is more concerned with attacking the messengers than providing a transparent, evidence-based rebuttal. Each subsequent section of their argument deserves a thorough critique, exposing these logical fallacies and psychological tricks for what they are: distractions from the truth. Becky.
This is another post by Gene 911 an hour later.
An hour.
And he or she is now directly talking to specific points of the article. Step out from behind the byline, an open invitation to Popular Mechanics for real 9/11 debate. This is an open letter. Dear editors of Popular Mechanics, Mr. Niggs, Mr. Dunbar, and Mr. Regan. It's rather convenient, isn't it? After years of peddling half-baked theories and rehashing the same tired explanations for the collapse of WT7, you've managed to sidestep an open, honest debate with those who dare ask for real evidence. For all the pomp in the articles, I see little more than selective science and hand-waving dismissals of anything that challenges your narrative. It's time to step out from behind your editorial walls and face the people who are calling you bluff. You've spent years labeling legitimate questions as conspiracy theories and ignore glaring inconsistencies. NIST had to abandon the pancake theory. Free fall was confirmed, and yet you still cling to your story. Let's cut the games. If you're so confident in the explanations, then have the courage to engage in an open, public discussion with prominent members of the 9/11 Truth Movement. Richard Gage and others have been waiting. Will you step up? Or will you keep hiding behind your articles? The ball is in your court. If your facts can stand on their own, you shouldn't be afraid to debate them. Regards, Gene Laratonda, gene@laratonda.com, 724-826-1001. The 9/11 War Room, Sundays at 5 p.m. ET, 911warroom.com. So that's the open letter that Gene 911, as part of the comments, sent to Popular Mechanics. Dave?
Yes. Now, Gene 911 also says in another post, World Trade Center 7, PM's attempt to explain away the collapse of World Trade Center 7, we know that as Building 7, is an insult to basic logic and an outright dismissal of overwhelming evidence. Their reliance on the tiered, discredited, progressive collapse theory is beyond frustrating, especially when NIST itself admits that World Trade Center 7, where WTC 7, fell at freefall acceleration for 2.25 seconds. Free fall, mind you, means zero resistance, a fact completely incompatible with the claim that fires and minor debris damage caused the building to crumble. And it would have been that my note is 80 columns had to fail simultaneously in the basement for this to have collapsed the way it did, apparently, according to people on the internet who are engineers and architects. Let's get one thing straight, says Gene 911. Fire has never caused a high-rise steel frame building to collapse, let alone symmetrically at free fall. Yet, here they are, trying to convince us that a few fires and some damage to the south face somehow triggered a perfect, near simultaneous failure of every column in the building. This isn't science, it's a fairy tale designed to prop up a broken narrative. The absurdity doesn't stop there. PM ignores clear evidence. WTC7 collapsed into its own footprint, just like a controlled demolition. Even NIST dropped the pancake theory, yet PM clings to weak explanations, avoiding the demolition hypothesis. The fires? Diesel tanks burning for 7 hours. It's absurd to think office fires brought down a 47-story skyscraper in seconds. The unique construction claim is just an excuse to avoid the obvious signs of demolition. PM's refusal to consider explosive demolition shows blatant bias. World Trade Center 7's collapse demands a deeper investigation, not this weak dismissal of key evidence.
And Gene 911 goes on to address seismic spikes. So Gene 911, of course, seems to have taken a particular interest and joy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. But it's not ad hominem attack. It's not derogatory. It's an open challenge.
That's right. Yep.
And I think it's rather well, well written as well.
Yes, agreed.
It does refer to things that we know are simply not accurate. The pancake theory for WT7 just doesn't work. So the next one is about seismic spikes. Again, G911, which was written at the same time as the comment just before. Popular mechanics' dismissal of seismic spikes during the Twin Towers collapse oversimplifies critical evidence. Dr. André Rousseau's analysis shows the spikes began before the collapse, indicating explosions occurred first. This contradicts the claim that debris alone caused the seismic activity. The article fails to address the low frequencies of the seismic waves, which are more consistent with explosions than falling debris. The magnitude of the waves and their timing do not align with a simple collapse, further pointing to explosive events. Rousseau also notes that the seismic wave speeds for the towers differed, something that wouldn't happen if the collapse were the sole cause. These differences support the idea that explosions, not just debris, triggered the seismic activity. Popular mechanics ignores key details like these, instead relying on an outdated pancaking theory. The evidence of explosions is stronger, but the analysis fails to engage with it, opting for oversimplification instead. Dave?
Yeah, that's true. Gene 911 says puffs of dust. PM tries to dismiss the puffs of dust seen during the collapses as a result of air being ejected due to the pancaking floors. This is a classic case of oversimplification. First, the timing of the puffs, occurring far below the collapse zone, raises immediate questions. These were not random bursts, these were precise, occurring in sequences characteristic of controlled demolitions. Ignoring this timing, the article falls back on the discredited pancaking theory, which even NIST's own FAQ no longer supports and hasn't for many years. The simple act of floors collapsing doesn't explain these sudden and forceful bursts of material so far below the impact site. Second, air pressure follows the path of least resistance, which would have been the massive gaping holes left by the planes. The idea that air pressure would build up enough to eject dust from floors far below the collapse zone doesn't align with basic physics. Third, Van Romero's initial expert analysis suggested that the collapse looked like a controlled demolition, but the article glosses over the significance of this. Even though Romero later retracted his statement, probably forcefully, the fact that the collapse resembled an implosion isn't dismissed by vague talk of air pressure. In typical fashion, PM doesn't engage with the actual evidence of explosions. Instead, they rely on an appeal to authority and avoid acknowledging the evidence that controlled demolitions provide a more plausible explanation for these puffs of dust.
And again, by G911, this is the melted steel. Now, you can see why I didn't share the article, because G911 pretty much addresses each paragraph of the article, giving the popular mechanics point of view and then Gene's point of view, or maybe the alternative point of view. Popular mechanics tries to dismiss the melted steel by steel claim by stating that jet fuel can't melt steel but can weaken it. They argue that steel only needed to lose strength, not melt, to cause collapse. While it's true, jet fuel burns between 800 and 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, well below steel's melting point, which is 2750 degrees Fahrenheit. This explanation avoids the core question: why was molten metal found in the debris at the bottom of the debris, of course? The article relies on generalizations about twisted and sagging steel without addressing specific reports of molten steel seen by numerous witnesses. Jet fuel may have ignited the fires, but the extreme temperatures required to melt metal, evident from molten steel found at ground zero, go far beyond what office materials and fuel can achieve. This detail is simply ignored. Popular mechanics also ignores the documented presence of nanothermite, a high-energy material more powerful than the known nanothermite from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. A military lab was found in the WTC dust and can easily reach temperatures sufficient to melt steel. The article dodges this evidence and instead repeats the same tired argument about weakening steel, never explaining how molten metal could exist without a more powerful agent. See 911lawyers.org, nanothermite.
Gene 911. Widespread damage. PM's explanation is not only implausible, but riddled with logical gaps. First, the notion of jet fuel cascading 80 stories down elevator shafts and still maintaining enough volatility to cause severe explosions at the lobby level stretches the limits of physics and fire dynamics. Jet fuel burns off quickly, and while it might ignite office materials, the idea that it travelled this distance is maintained enough destructive energy is suspect. Even NIST's own experts admit that it's hard to document where the fuel went, essentially conceding the uncertainty in their own hypothesis. Second, eyewitness testimony from the lobby and lower levels consistently reported explosions that do not align with a gradual fire spread or cascading jet fuel. These explosions occurred immediately after the plane impacts. PM conveniently omits the dozens of reports from firefighters, first responders, and survivors who heard and felt distinct, powerful explosions in lower levels, which cannot be explained by jet fuel burning floors above. Third, this section leans on vague references to documentaries and expert commentary, offering no concrete proof that jet fuel alone could cause such widespread damage. Instead of addressing the possibility of explosives, they rely on an appeal to authority, avoiding engagement with key inconsistencies. This explanation in inverted commas, fails to hold up, serving only to defend the official narrative while ignoring critical questions about the real cause of widespread damage. Meki, we've got 5 minutes, 6 minutes.
Well, it's plenty of time. And then a bit more. Now, this was mostly done by Gene. This next one is by Joe, 1886, which was written a day earlier. Interesting and entertaining story, a good rehash and refresher on all the talk that was stimulated. Anyone who says that there are always two sides to a story is naive. There's far more than that. Luckily, there's apparently a preponderance of objective and informed professionals dealing with the significant realities that we should learn from and deal with. Not bad that they're challenged to think outside the box, but aren't easily duped. Ray, the idea you can't melt steel with a simple fire sounds great superficially, but what about all those iron, steel, glass furnaces that are used every day and have been for decades that run on hydrocarbon fuels, and yes, other things as well, but oh well. So, just to be clear, you need a very special furnace to create steel. Okay, and steel is iron bonded with carbon. That's what steel is. Right? Now there are different, mixes and whatnot. Different alloys, slightly, but steel essentially is iron and carbon, and you need extremely high temperatures for iron to bond with carbon. That's why we couldn't do it for a very long time. And steel is I guess as far as the human history is concerned, or the human story, steel is a fairly recent invention. Iron was always used, iron, bronze, copper, etc. But steel was very, very hard to make because it required really high temperatures. And equally, steel has a very high melting point. You can't just have a fire and melt steel. It doesn't work that way. You have to have a blast furnace. Now, a blast furnace is a furnace that is fed oxygen, a lot of oxygen, to increase the temperature inside the furnace. That's how you can melt steel. Those temperatures were never reached inside the World Trade Centers, ever. It never melted. Weakening, sure, it could have weakened, but it never melted, and that's the point. Just do the next couple, and then you can do the next ones. Actually, I know the next one, then you do. So the next one is McDangus.
That's correct.
January 30th, 2024. The original theory that is now skewed is that melted steel was reportedly found at the base of the site, indicating the use of thermite. And Dave, there's a response with Dwee Bonnick. Why don't you share that?
Yes. So the amount of thermite needed would create huge chains of explosions which were not heard or recorded. The smaller expulsions of air that were observed were just what happens when air is compressed, not remotely big enough to be explosions strong enough to break girders and steel supports.
And there's another response to that from Cydonia.com. You're correct in that the seismic data failed to support scenarios concerning explosions, nukes, etc. It also contradicts the official explanation, as the two towers, circa 500,000 ton material each, should have made a significant bigger impact than what the readings tell us. In fact, if they did collapse, the debris certainly would have damaged the bathtub that they were built in, causing Lower Manhattan to be flooded with the Hudson River. That did not happen, though. The debris was basically non-existent, which is really interesting. Just as a side note, that is correct. The debris was pulverized. So we didn't have much. I mean, there was some debris naturally, and it was cleared away very quickly. But considering the size of the towers and the amount of steel and concrete in it, and the way it collapsed, it was mostly powdery rubble, right? Which is really not consistent with anything in the world that I live in. So it's very, very strange. Why don't you, I think we've got time for it, why don't you share the next one with us, Dave?
All right, so Spromford.
Yep.
This entire article is elementary trash, insulting anyone with half a brain, and naturally avoids the real smoking guns of 9/11. The speed and symmetry of the collapses. Without an additional energy source, there is no way those buildings should have collapsed that fast, period. There was 70 to 80 stories of perfectly healthy, strong and unheated structural steel below the impacts the impact points that would have provided substantial resistance, therefore slowing down the whole process. Yet all 3 towers basically collapsed like there was little to no resistance at all. Something was obviously removing that resistance. As far as the symmetry of the collapses is concerned, a building or structure that has asymmetric damage cannot collapse symmetrically, at least not without some extra help. It violates fundamental laws of physics. Experts in building demolition know this very well. To achieve a symmetric collapse, you must sever all of the support columns of a building at the same time within milliseconds of each other, exactly what we see in World Trade Center Building 7. The speed and symmetry of the World Trade Center building collapses is proof that we are being lied to, and shame on Popular Mechanics for putting out this garbage. It's an insult to the innocent lives lost on that horrible day. And there's the end of Zisha. And we'll see you next week. Actually, we'll see you next week for Plato's Cave, Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 7 a.m. Eastern, and again next week for Shiny Side Out. But what do we say, Meki?
Be safe!